Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 7 o'clock main news. In tonight's headlines, Kuwait Red Crescent Society distributes humanitarian aid to Syrian families in southeastern Lebanon refugee camps. Taliban gunmen killed 12 landmine clearers as militants carry out a series of attacks in the Afghan capital, Kabul. At least 18 people have died and more than 90 are missing after a landslide on Indonesia's main island of Java. And computer system failure at UK airports causes wide disruption as dozens of arrivals and departures are cancelled. The State of Kuwait, since its independence in the 1960s, has demonstrated keenness on aiding nations in need of help, resisting injustice and securing a dignified living for the impoverished. Such an approach has resulted in viewing humanitarian action as a feature of Kuwait's identity. Therefore, the United Nations has recently designated His Highness the Emir, Sheikh Sabah al-Ahmed al-Jabir al-Sabah, as a humanitarian leader and Kuwait as a humanitarian centre. That said, Farah Tawfiq al-Gharabali, the diplomatic attaché serving with the Kuwaiti mission at the United Nations, shedding light on the background that has prompted the international organisation to grant such distinctive honouring to the country's top leader and Kuwait itself. The diplomatic attaché was addressing a UN session examining plans for boosting UN humanitarian aid and relief in catastrophes worldwide. Al-Gharabali added that the UN honouring of His Highness the Emir signals the state of Kuwait's respect for humanity, promoting peace and aiding those in need, affirming that Kuwait would continue coordinating with the United Nations, aspiring to realise prosperity and stability for nations of the globe. The diplomat indicated that Kuwait advocates international partnership in this respect and unifying nations' potentials and efforts to alleviate human suffering. Kuwait Red Crescent Society, or the KRCS, distributed food and blankets to about 250 Syrian families who have taken up refuge in Hasbaya in southeastern Lebanon. The Society envoy in Lebanon, Dr. Saad al-Anizi, said the relief supplies were given to the Syrian refugees as the latest batch of humanitarian support granted to the Syrians to help them cope with the difficult living conditions. According to the United Nations, some 3 million Syrians who have fled the violence at home to several neighbouring countries, including Lebanon. Al-Anizi added that the study fees for 800 Syrian students settled in the Bekaa Valley in eastern Lebanon have been covered, noting that the money is provided by the Kuwaiti Nest Group for educating children. The group functions under the KRCS's umbrella. IS militants shot down an Iraqi military helicopter, killing the 2 pilots on board, raising concerns about the extremist ability to attack aircraft amid ongoing US-led coalition airstrikes. The helicopter was flying near the outskirts of Samarra, a town which has seen bloody clashes between Iraqi army troops and the IS militants. Some fear the militants may have captured ground-to-air missiles capable of shooting down airplanes when they overran Iraqi and Syrian army bases this summer. Meanwhile, fighters from the IS of Iraq and Levant have mounted 2 suicide car bomb attacks aimed at security checkpoints at the main entrance into Haditha city, killing at least 12 and injuring 17 more. Clashes between Palestinians and Israeli soldiers and settlers spread across the West Bank amid rising outrage on continued Israeli attacks against Palestinians and their lands. The Palestinian Authority warned that more Israeli attacks would further deteriorate the situation and block international efforts. Fatma Abdul Karim from Ramallah has the details.
Arising clashes between Palestinian youth from the one hand and Israeli soldiers and settlers from the other, all over the West Bank, is threatening to increase. Palestinians are outraged by continued Israeli attacks on Palestinians and the green light given to settlers to carry out arbitrary attacks on Palestinians almost everywhere.
Since it's an elections year, we are expecting more escalation, and we expect that the Palestinians will be the fuel of this election campaign among different Israeli fractions that compete who will be more extreme, more racist towards Palestinians.
Friday especially witnessed several clashes in different towns and refugee camps in the West Bank. Several were injured and at least 3 were arrested arbitrarily during clashes. The Palestinian Authority believes this will further deteriorate the situation and block international efforts.
The
Palestinian leadership is looking into a series of measures to put an end to those crimes and attacks. Maybe tomorrow there will be new decisions related to support the steadfastness of our people facing the occupation crimes.
It is hard to expect when confrontations break out with the Israeli forces in the field, but the recent wave of violence is only increasing and spreading into more towns and villages. With the increased Israeli military presence in the West Bank, friction is likely to increase. Observers say this is likely to lead into a breakout of a series of clashes that could be out of control. Fatma Abdelkarim, Kuwait TV, Ramallah, Palestine.
The US Senate has approved a new annual defense bill expanding the military campaign against IS militants. The bill approves a general Pentagon budget of $496 billion plus $64 billion for US wars abroad. The measure also authorizes the training and equipping of moderate Syrian rebel fighters for 2 years. The bill has already been passed by the House of Representatives and has now been sent to President Barack Obama to sign into law. The US-led coalition has launched more than 600 airstrikes against IS militant targets in Iraq since the campaign began on August 8th. Afghan police said today that Taliban gunmen have shot dead 12 people working to clear landmines in southern Helmand province. Later, Afghan soldiers took on the militants in a gun battle, killing 4 and capturing 3. In the capital Kabul, a suicide bomber attacked a bus carrying Afghan soldiers, and the Taliban said it killed a senior Supreme Court official. Meanwhile, NATO said 2 of its soldiers died when insurgents attacked close to the main international base north of Kabul. The incidents come amid an upsurge of Taliban violence as the US and NATO mission in Afghanistan nears its end. Talks have continued well past the official close of business on the final day of a key UN climate summit in Peru aimed at advancing a new global treaty. The negotiators in the capital Lima are tasked with preparing a text to serve as the basis for a new compact to be signed in Paris next year. US Secretary of State John Kerry warned that the world is still on a course leading to tragedy. He added that a deal was not an option but an urgent necessity. Negotiators have been meeting in Lima for almost 2 weeks to prepare the elements of the new treaty. Meanwhile, the long-running divisions between rich and poor countries are hampering progress. Torrential downpours have triggered a landslide on Indonesia's main island of Java, killing at least 8 people and leaving nearly 100 others missing, with persistent rain hampering rescue efforts. Landslides triggered by heavy rains and floods are common in tropical Indonesia during the rainy season. More details in the following report.
Rescuers struggled to reach more than 100 people missing after a landslide triggered by rains poured houses in a hilly district on Indonesia's main island of Java. At least 18 people were killed and scores injured when an estimated 105 houses were swept away by mud gushing into Jumpling village in central Java overnight, while about 370 other residents were evacuated to several temporary shelters. A spokesman for the National Disaster Mitigation Agency said that the rescuers have so far retrieved at least 10 bodies and brought dozens of injured villagers to a hospital, many of them in critical condition. Rescuers, including officials from the local disaster management agency office, soldiers, police and volunteers, have been on the scene, but the threat of possible repeat of the landslide at the scene is still hampering the search and rescue operation. Officials said if the downpours persist, the search would resume early tomorrow. Friday's landslide was the second in several days on densely populated Java Island, as mud and rocks also hit central Java's Wonosobo district on Thursday, killing at least 2 villagers. Seasonal rains and high tides in recent days have caused dozens of landslides and widespread flooding across much of Indonesia, a chain of 17,000 islands where millions of people live in mountainous areas or near fertile floodplains near rivers. According to officials, an average of 541 people have died every year from floods and landslides in the country over the past decade.
Residents in western Washington state were cleaning up after stormy weather blew through the Pacific Northwest, knocking out electrical power and even toppling some homes. No one was hurt. According to the National Weather Service, a dry spell forecast for this weekend after several days of heavy rain should lower the risk of landslides in western Washington. The storms have battered the west coast of the United States, also touched off a small tornado in Los Angeles on Friday morning. The weather system, known as the Pineapple Express, hammered the north and center of the state with hurricane-force winds and up to 10 inches of rain on Thursday. The storm caused flight cancellations and left hundreds of thousands of people in the dark. Airports across the United Kingdom have been returning to normal, although almost 40 flights were cancelled at Heathrow the day after a computer failure at the National Air Traffic Control Centre, which has not been seen before. Our reporter Dina Nasser has more on this story.
London's Heathrow Airport cancelled more flights today, the day after a computer glitch at an air traffic control centre led to a major disruption of air traffic into and out of London. Some 38 flights out of 1,300 were cancelled as airlines dealt with the knock-on effects of the shutdown. Dozens of flights were cancelled yesterday following the computer failure at NATS, the National Air Traffic Services, the UK-based air traffic management company. Officials at London Heathrow Airport said there was a power cut at the NATS control centre in Swanwick, England. That shutdown led to planes and flight crews being out of position. Heathrow, Europe's busiest airport, put extra staff on duty in hopes of getting stranded passengers in the air. British Air Traffic Control said on Friday afternoon that a computer glitch that was causing air delays over London had been resolved. NATS controls all of British airspace from two centres, one in Swanwick and another in Scotland. Gatwick and London City flights were expected to operate as normal, but advised all passengers to check the status of their flight before leaving for the airport.
China's president led a memorial event today to commemorate the 77th anniversary of the Nanking Massacre, now known as Nanjing, amid a drive to preserve memories of Japan's brutal invasion and stir patriotism. Chinese President Xi Jinping said at the memorial that China and Japan should set aside hatred and not allow the minority who led Japan to war to affect relations now. Relations between the two countries have been strained in recent years. Participants at the ceremony and people throughout the national capital observed a minute's silence against the wail of what was described as the world's largest air raid siren. The British Embassy recently hosted a press conference to announce the soon arrival and guidelines for the long-anticipated electronic visa application system. The new system will be implemented in the first half of 2015 and will allow for visas to be obtained in 48 hours or less. Held at the Visa Application Centre, the meeting was attended by the Middle East and North Africa Director of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Edward Ogden, alongside the Director of Europe Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Ambassador Walid Al-Khbezi, and the British Ambassador to Kuwait, His Excellency Matthew Lodge. Badriya Saleh brings us this story.
Kuwaitis intending to visit the United Kingdom will soon be able to enjoy a speedier visa application process. The Internet Visa Application System is due to be introduced in the country in the first half of 2015. The e-visa will be free for those wishing to travel once for a period of 6 months for tourism to Britain.
I know myself after the last 3.5 months of being here in Kuwait that this is a very important issue. It's something that we devote an awful lot of attention and effort to getting right. And so I'm very pleased that both of our guests today have had a chance to come and see how it works, to hear from the staff, and now to talk to you about the way the UK and Kuwait are working together to make sure that this particular part of the relationship operates as smoothly as it can and provides Kuwaitis and other travellers the opportunity to go to the UK and do their business.
The delay in the setup of the new system is due to a fault in the computer software in 3 other countries, in which 40% of applications were getting thrown out. Once that tweak is worked out, the new system should be implemented soon following. The e-application will not be available for Kuwaitis intending to travel to the UK for healthcare, study, business purposes, or long-term stays. Kuwaitis intending to travel to the United Kingdom will need to apply at least 48 hours before travel to benefit from the Internet Visa Waiver Application System.
The relationship between Britain and Kuwait is really one of the heart as well as of the head, and we put really high importance on the the Kuwaiti community in the UK and Kuwaiti visitors to the UK, both being happy there but also having a good experience in going there. There is quite a logistical problem, if you think about it, in how you respectfully and efficiently organise for 120,000 people a year to go from Kuwait to London. And so what we've tried to do with these arrangements is make it respectful of people's time, respectful of the culture, respectful of family, and so that it is as efficient and user-friendly for Kuwaitis as we can possibly make it, but also as secure both for Kuwaitis and for us as we can make it.
For Kuwait alone, 120,000 visas for the UK are issued per year. The number of Kuwaitis who travel to the United Kingdom is as great as those from the UAE, Qatar and Oman combined, a testament to the strong ties between the two countries that are intended to only strengthen through the implementation of this new system. At the El Tijari Tower, I'm Badriya Saleh reporting for the English News.
For a chance to see our reports again, please visit our YouTube channel at MOI Kuwait News. And to recap tonight's news, here are the headlines once again. The Kuwait Red Crescent Society distributes humanitarian aid to Syrian families in southeastern Lebanon refugee camps. Taliban gunmen killed 12 landmine clearers as militants carry out a series of attacks in the Afghan capital, Kabul. At least 18 people have died and more than 90 are missing after a landslide on Indonesia's main island of Java. And computer system failure at UK airports causes wide disruption as dozens of arrivals and departures are cancelled. Thank you for joining us.